so happy to have Maz back on the show. Thanks for being here, Maz.
Thanks for having me. I am so excited for this one.
I think this is going to be an interesting topic, and I came up with it a few weeks ago because I was looking at a list of the highest grossing movies of all time. And especially thinking about what life was like before the pandemic closures of 2020. And we are going to talk about Disney's billion-dollar busts. So these are going to be Disney movies that made $1 billion at the box office, which you think, well, that's one of the most successful movies of all time. Literally one of the 50 most successful movies of all time if you made $1 billion. But we are going to talk about which of those movies had zero cultural relevance, even though they made $1 billion. And this is a topic we've sort of touched on before with Disney and their movies, where they might be trying to get blood from a stone a little bit and they're milking some of their intellectual properties too much, and they're not promoting new movies, they're not promoting new ideas, especially Walt Disney animated pictures that aren't sequels. So we are going to talk about the billion-dollar bust. We're going to go over each movie that made over $1 billion for Disney since, I think we decided, 2015, and we're going to go through 2019. And I did have actually one more than we discussed before we started recording. Avengers Age of Ultron also made $1 billion. So I think the one place where this is going to be a little tricky is talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I do believe that the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole has had a cultural impact. But some of these individual movies em- sort of emphasize the problem that Disney has, where they need you to be coming as part of a bigger endeavor.
Yeah, I think what's very interesting, and we'll see this as we get into it, um, but a little teaser, every movie on this list is part of a franchise, is a sequel, is a remake. There are no original movies listed. And I think that, like you said, speaks to the problems we've discussed before with Disney and their approach to movies. Um, but I think it also does show that even though series as a whole can be super important, not every installment in those franchises carries the same weight.
Right, because as somebody who did not get into the Marvel Cinematic Universe at all, I do know there are Marvel movies that broke out of the mold, that broke out
Mhm.
of the clique, right? And this Age of Ultron, I don't even remember it being released. And I believe I was, like, I was on a radio station, a pop radio station at the time. We gave away movie tickets, we talked about new movies, and just I have no recollection of it. I'm sure that I did commercials for it or gave away tickets for it, but I just don't remember it. It's sort of blended in with all of the other Avengers movies in my mind. And would you say that's probably an accurate assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am a Marvel fan. I have seen through Endgame every Marvel movie, almost every single one, multiple times. Ultron is one of the few that I saw once and was like, yeah, that's enough. that movie existed. Obviously, it is part of the Avengers like collaboration mini series within the Marvel universe. So it's important for setting up some events. But overall, if you were to press me on what happened in that movie, outside of a couple things, it's pretty forgettable.
So we are going to move on now to, obviously, this next one had a cultural impact. You can't deny it. Whether you like the sequels, whether you don't like the sequels, it doesn't matter. Star Wars The Force Awakens, over $2 billion. Even the Disney sequel hate, while some of it sprung up for The Force Awakens, really it wasn't until a little later that hate started to bubble up. I think this was a pretty widely liked movie. It was big in cultural impact. I remember Saturday Night Live bits. I remember people waiting in line, like this was almost like the last waiting in line to go see a movie. Um Jokes on Big Bang Theory, like it was a part of the zeitgeist and you can't deny that.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. I mean, for me, the prequels came out when I was pretty young. So I remember them coming out. I remember going to see them. But this was the first time where as an adult, when I was very fully aware of the impact this would have, seeing them return to the Star Wars universe, and especially after the prequels, there was so much hype and hope that this was going to kind of redeem the franchise, that this new trilogy was going to be the thing that erased the errors of the prequels and they would have learned from it. And I think, The Force Awakens is not a perfect movie, but it is pretty darn similar to A New Hope. And everyone likes A New Hope. So how do you not love The Force Awakens?
And I think that we might have to do an episode on this later. I don't know if we're in a world where we can have Star Wars anymore.
Hmm.
And I'm going to bring up a documentary, another YouTuber, and I really wish that I remembered the name of the YouTuber. I apologize. But he compared Taylor Swift to the last episode of the television show MASH. And he said that Taylor Swift was kind of like the last thing that we have in society, to where the last episode of MASH aired and it was like 6 out of 10 American households watched it. And they had problems with the plumbing in New York City because everybody flushed the toilet at the same time because they were all waiting to go to the bathroom. Like, we don't have those cultural moments anymore. We're so divided, and Star Wars is a prime example where people started having problems based on their particular political opinions. We're divided politically. We are able to get whatever little niche that we want. So, something like Star Wars, that in 1977, it was one of like three movies you could go see. So, everybody went and saw it. And it was this big cultural moment and everybody was talking about it. So everybody had to go see it, even if they didn't like that kind of movie. So we don't have that in our society anymore. And maybe The Force Awakens was like one little final taste of everybody paying attention to this one thing. And then it moved on to Captain America Civil War. This is another one that feels like it was Marvel, so it made $1 billion because you had to keep going because you had to stay a part of the story. But I don't know exactly how much it resonated with people.
Yeah, I mean, this was it was a pretty big movie in terms of moving the overarching Marvel story forward. Like it had very important plot points. It is personally one of my least favorites of the whole Marvel franchise. And I know that that's an unpopular opinion. A lot of people really love this one. I don't think it's a Captain America story. It's an Avengers Light story, and it should have been billed as such. But I think that, it wasn't the most impactful Marvel movie, but it was pretty important at the end of the day.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to take your word for it because, like I said, I'm not huge into the Marvel ones. But this is where, first of all, we're going to get this out of the way. You love Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Now,
I sure do.
your love for the movie does not necessarily reflect its impact on society overall. So, we are not putting down Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Definitely Maz would not, because I think it's your favorite Star Wars movie, right?
It is. It is.
But this is where the kinks in the armor started to show, I think, for Disney Star Wars. Not because people didn't like it, because I think this is the most universally loved Disney Star Wars movie. This is the one that
Yes.
Star Wars fans like the most, if they have seen it.
Hmm.
But because it wasn't a part of the Skywalker saga, I think this was the first one that people thought, well, maybe I don't have to go see it because it's not continuing this same story that I had known. Now, I think Disney actually could have done a better job of saying, well, it's pretty doggone close to the story that you've already known. Um, I think that this had an impact, but I don't think it was what Disney was expecting. I think Disney was hoping that they could start telling different stories in the Star Wars universe that would make $1 billion. And this one did, but it made 1.057 billion. And as we will find out, Solo, a Star Wars story, did not make $1 billion. And I think that is a sign that, and then Disney backed away. And then Disney basically said, okay, we're going to slow down our Star Wars movies.
Yeah, gosh, the wheels are turning. I feel like this could be an episode in its own right. Um, I think that it is absolutely fascinating that Rogue One, when it came out as a movie, it was popular. Everyone who saw it was like, this is peak Star Wars. Like, this is what Star Wars is meant to be. Even though it had like a lack of Jedi on screen, people still were like, this is a great movie. But it wasn't like people still avoided seeing it because they were like, well, yeah, it's not the Skywalker. There's no like Jedi. Why am I going to spend my time on this? And then it's one of those situations where it became more relevant once they made the series. But like now it is a huge cultural touchstone point, I think, for like Star Wars fans. That series is huge. And I remember when they first announced it, people being like, do we really need a series about Cassian Andor? Why are we making a series about this guy? Of all the Star Wars people, why is it him? And it turned out that yes, we really did need to tell that story. It's a hugely important story. But at the time, it was not the huge cultural thing that like banded everyone together. And I think, like you had said, Rogue One, okay, barely made $1 million. And then Solo kind of crashed and burned. And Disney kind of said, we're gonna give up on this, actually. We're not gonna do this anymore. And then they threw everything into TV shows. And I think that's a really fascinating topic, and I don't want to derail us too much further. But I do think it speaks to the fact that Rogue One was kind of the start of them being like, maybe TV is where we need to be focusing our non-Skywalker Star Wars story efforts.
Or maybe because they're going to be making this Mandalorian and Baby Yoda movie, maybe Disney Plus is almost going to become like the minor leagues of Star
Yeah.
Wars. If you can make it and you can find that cultural zeitgeist on Disney Plus, then you'll get your movie. But you got to prove yourself in the sticks, and then we'll give you your
Hmm.
shot in the big show. Um, I think a lot of that makes a lot of sense. I think that Rogue One, it's hard to say. It feels like they should have just done the sequels and then done Rogue One and then started to branch out a little bit. Give us the end of the story that you were telling and then start to tell us these other stories. And I think that had they done that, had Rogue One been the story that they told after the ninth installment, maybe they would have had a more coherent plan going into those movies, as we will inevitably discuss in
Yeah.
a couple minutes.
Oh, we'll get there.
So we're going to move on to this is where the milking of the stone, this is where getting blood out of the stone, beating the dead horse really started to show. And that is the live action Beauty and the Beast, which I like. When I told our other co host, Sarah Says, that we were doing this episode, she said, don't poop on that Beauty and the Beast live action. I liked it. And we are saying it has nothing to do with how we like the movie, but this had zero cultural impact. This did almost nothing.
Yeah. And again, I'm with you and Sarah. I enjoyed this movie. This is, I think, yes, this is in my top three Disney live action remakes. So, like, I really did enjoy it. It had no cultural relevance outside of one, people hating the ball gown and the changes they made to it. And the single most culturally relevant thing to come from this movie was how absolutely horrid the Belle doll looked.
Oh, yeah.
That was the thing that was everywhere. It wasn't the movie, it wasn't anything about the movie. It was, oh my God, what did they do to Emma Watson's face on this doll? That was it. And that's not a great sign.
I also feel like this movie led to a million YouTube essays about how Disney was, destroying our childhood. And I don't think it was popular enough. I know it made
No.
$1 billion, but it didn't ruin the legacy of the original Beauty and the Beast at all. Here we are less than 10 years after it. Actually, I can't even believe it's been that close to 10 years now, but
Yeah, wow.
and I don't think one person looks at the original Beauty and the Beast any differently. I do think there were a lot of good things about this version, including the new song. I thought the new song was great. I thought that some of the things they did were just, hey, let's answer critiques people had of the original from the internet, which is also another disturbing trend that got started with this because that's basically how they wrote the script for The Rise of Skywalker. But we'll get to that later as well.
Oh,
Um So we're gonna move on from Beauty and the Beast to this one. You can't say didn't have cultural relevance. It definitely did because it created more fights. I can tell more about your personality by asking what you thought of Star Wars The Last Jedi than I can almost any other topic. And it's crazy because I thought this was just a really, really good Star Wars movie, but a lot of people were definitely turned off by it. They did not like Luke's portrayal in the movie. They did not like Finn and Rose and their little side quest that has definitely gained a lot of friction among the community. But I don't think you can say Star Wars The Last Jedi was not relevant. So this is one that I think did break the mold a little bit.
Yeah, I would say arguably this is one of the most culturally relevant movies Disney has made in the past 10 years, for better or for worse. It's everywhere. Everyone has an opinion on it. There are millions of YouTube video essays on it from every standpoint imaginable. And it really, really shaped culturally how Disney moved forward with the series. And I think that is a huge point. The reaction, the backlash to this movie was majorly impactful on what we ended up getting to wrap up the series. And what is really a hallmark of something being more culturally relevant than its response dictating how it moves forward?
If Star Wars The Last Jedi was received differently by certain pockets of the community, we would have 15 Star Wars movies out by now.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, as someone who really enjoyed the movie, and I really enjoyed, like we just said, The Force Awakens is very similar to A New Hope. You could see the new trilogy kind of following the beats of the original one. It was really exciting to see The Last Jedi kind of break from that mold and tell a story that was new, tell a story that, could have had a new lesson, a new message, something we haven't heard a million times already from the original series, from the prequels, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting to see how some people received that, and kind of, I don't want to say torpedoed because obviously Disney is the party responsible for making this series, but the response to this definitely dictated how Disney treated the Star Wars property in general.
And this was a culturally relevant movie, but it led to quite possibly the most culturally irrelevant movie of all time. And we'll get there.
Yep.
The next one, you can't argue with this one. You can't argue with the next two. They're both super culturally relevant. Black Panther just dominated. It's one of the two Marvel movies that I have seen. Obviously, Michael B. Jordan being in it played a part in it. But Black Panther, culturally relevant, relevant to the overall story, even though it was a good enough standalone movie that you didn't have to watch all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to understand it. And they just knocked the they just knocked it out of the park with this one.
Yeah. I mean, this is undoubtedly one of the best Marvel movies ever made, just in general. It is an excellent movie on all fronts. The story is excellent, the directing, the cinematography, just everything about it, the score. It is a beautiful movie top to bottom. And it the impact it had was incredible. It was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. It was a huge deal. Um, and it was very fun to see a movie that was like a Marvel standalone, because I feel like at this point in the Marvel journey, we were getting more and more cohesive, where movies would have like people popping in and like you had to see this movie to kind of fully understand the implications of this movie, which is an issue that I think Marvel has, especially now. But Black Panther was something that I had friends who had never watched a Marvel movie before going to see Black Panther because it was getting such good reviews, and they walked out of it loving it, not feeling like they'd missed anything.
And that was important too, because I think a movie like Black Panther, you wanted to pull people in who weren't necessarily Marvel fans, because it did speak to different groups of people. It did speak to black communities that might not be Marvel fans, but they're going to check out this movie. And if it was too intertwined with other parts of the cinematic universe, and you're coming into it and watching it for the first time, you'd be like, well, I don't need to know. I don't want to have to learn all this backstory. But maybe you come into Black Panther and you're like, all right, this was great. And then you start checking out the other stuff. So I
Hmm.
think making sure that not everything has to be consumed with other pieces of media was a good lesson for Disney to learn with this one.
Hmm.
And then they learned the exact opposite lesson with the next one, and that was Infinity War, but this was huge. $2.048 billion dollars. Um Cultural impact couldn't
Off
be
the
any
charts.
higher. Yeah. So they really did have three there in 2018 that did what they were expecting. But then this is when I really think the kinks in the armor started to show. Incredibles 2. It basically led to the math is math meme. And that's the only cultural relevance I can think of from this movie. I don't even quite remember all that much about it.
Well, we also got Num Num Cookie.
Okay, we got
That
Num
was the
Num
other big
Cookie.
thing.
And then they released
The
them and you could get them at Hollywood Studios and they were too sweet and it was kind of gross.
Yep.
But we did get Num Num Cookie and we got a good meme out of it. But besides that,
And
I
like,
don't think this was necessary. We
no. And
certainly don't
I,
need the third one in 2028.
ugh, no. Incredibles is truly one of my favorite Pixar movies. I think it's a great movie. Incredibles 2, I actually really enjoyed, for what it was. I thought it was a very fun movie. Outside of those memes, zero impact. Again, yeah, could not tell you much of the story. I am concerned going into Incredibles 3. I'm hoping it'll be like a Toy Story 3 redemption moment, but I don't have the faith in them that I used to.
And it's not coming out until 2028 or
It's a
something like
long
that. Like,
time.
it is a long time on that movie. And it just feels like, like I've said before, that Bob Iger just wrote, you're going to do a third Incredibles movie, and wrote it on a piece of paper and gave it to animation and said, go do it. Like, they didn't have a script, they didn't have anything. I just feel that way with that one. Now we have another controversial one where I think if you're not terminally online, this one feels like it was irrelevant. If you're terminally online, it felt like it was super relevant, and that's Captain Marvel.
Yes, I think it was relevant online for all the wrong reasons.
Absolutely.
It any I think unfortunately any impact it really had was from a certain group of people being angry that it existed. And unfortunately, that's primarily what it's known for now is the controversy it's caused, which is unfortunate.
This was another area where you could see Disney's plans change based on the internet's reaction to a movie where we don't get as many female led Marvel stories as we might have gotten had the reaction not been what it was for this. But this was a perfectly fine movie. I actually saw this one. This is one of the two Marvel movies that I've seen. And it's another one like Black Panther that could stand alone. You didn't have to watch all of the cinematic universe to understand it. So I was able to enjoy it on its own. And I liked it. I thought that the criticisms were stupid. I often think we take comic book movies way too seriously. That is one of the reasons. And I know a lot of people just don't like Brie Larson. She seems awesome to me. I haven't found anything. I know
Yeah.
when they were getting ready for this movie, one of the things she did was like they put a Jeep in neutral and she pushed it up a hill backwards. And I was like watching that video and I'm like, how can you not like this chick? She seems awesome. Like,
Dang, I didn't know that. That is impressive.
go look at it because I
I
literally
will.
know I saw it. She put her back on the spare tire and pushed it up a hill.
That's
Um,
wild.
but this was when Disney started to really, really listen too much to the criticism online after The Last Jedi and then Captain Marvel. Bob Iger really started to panic.
Yeah. And I think it's frustrating because, like, Captain Marvel was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie, but it never gets criticized for the things that it actually deserves to be criticized for, if that makes sense. Like, there are story elements that, I mean, like you said, it's a byproduct of taking a superhero movie too seriously. But there are elements that were like, okay, this part could have been written a little better. This reveal could have been set up better to be more of a twist. And like you never hear people talk about those things. It's always like, oh, Brie Larson, I hate Brie Larson. And it's like, come on, people. Really?
She's a Mary Sue. She's a superhero for the love of. Anyway,
Also, Tony Stark, like, really? Come
I
on
know.
now.
Don't get me started. Okay. Avengers Endgame, $2.797 billion, second highest grossing movie of all time. At one point was number one. This was culturally relevant. And actually, I would say the start of the downfall for Disney making Marvel movies because now that they had sort of tied a bow on the story, they didn't really know where to go after that. And I think they're still kind of trying to figure out what to do with the Marvel property because Disney won't say, all right, we got all of these $1 billion movies out of Marvel. Maybe we just let it rest for a while. Let it ride. Let it chill. Let it sit back, wait 10, 15 years, and then new Marvel Cinematic Universe. They definitely want to keep continuing down the road of releasing Marvel movies, but they're never going to have the cultural impact of this one unless they take a break.
Yes. And I would argue that this was like the last time there was really a moment where everyone had watched something and was talking about something. It was everywhere. You could not go anywhere in person, online. This was the hot topic. And it was fun. It was so much fun. Um, and then I think they just didn't know how to move forward. And instead of taking a beat and saying, we're going to come up with a new arc and we're going to wait 5 years, they were like, no, let's make 4 movies a year and 3 TV shows, and it's all going to be intertwined, and you have to watch all of it to get it. And it kind of just burned people out and burned up all the goodwill that Endgame bought them because it was a perfect ending.
And now we are getting back to the live action remakes and the live action remake of Aladdin, which just snuck over $1 billion. And I would say this is another one that had zero impact. I think you will find more people who complained that Will Smith was taking over the role of Genie than you will actually find people who saw this movie. I saw it in the theaters. I liked it. However, it did have no cultural impact, and I'm still a Robin Williams. Like, Robin Williams was the genie, and anything else after that is just a different genie to me. It's not even the same character.
Yes, 100%. Um, I I also saw it in theaters. I also liked it. I liked that they made some changes to some of the lyrics, to update it and make it less insensitive in places. I think that was a very smart move. Um, but like in terms of its relevancy, it never really caught on. Like you said, I think, Robin Williams is one of those actors where you can't really follow him up. And I think Will Smith did a great job with like what he could do. Like he was a good genie. He did a good job, but no one is going to be Robin Williams. And so it almost is like it defeated itself before it had a chance to do anything because you just, he really was, I mean, pardon the pun, magic in a bottle, and you just can't capture that twice.
I thought Naomi Scott was great in this movie. I thought
Yeah.
that her original song was really good. This is the second time that I really liked the original song that they added to the live action remake. There was just something about it that felt unnecessary.
Hmm.
Like, I enjoyed it, but there was no point where I was like, boy, I needed this. Like, and I guess sometimes it's entertainment, so just sit down and enjoy something and don't overanalyze everything. But for you, I never think about like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and watch that live action Aladdin. You know what
Right.
I mean? So,
Right.
um, I guess
Like
that's
if I want to watch Aladdin, I'm going to put on the animated Aladdin and watch that. I'm never going to go, "Oh, I want to watch Aladdin. Let me put on the live action remake."
and that
It
might
doesn't hit the
actually
same.
be the best way to describe some of these movies. Like, even some of the Marvel movies that connect things. Once they've
Hmm.
connected the things, do you really have to go back and watch them? Once you've seen these live action Disney movies, do you really have to go back and watch them? So that's probably a good barometer to whether it is relevant. I think this one we might disagree, or we might have different thoughts on it anyway. Toy Story 4. I think a lot of people felt like Toy Story 3 was the perfect way to end this series, and that Toy Story 4, they either really liked it or they really didn't. What are your thoughts on it?
I I am one of the people who think Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending. Now, granted, Toy Story was the franchise that I grew up with. This was like the one that followed me. Toy Story 3 came out, I think, the year before I went to college. So, like, it really did kind of follow my life, and I really was attached to that. Toy Story 4, I thought was unnecessary. I thought it didn't understand the characters and their motivations. I thought it didn't really make sense for it to exist. Now, that being said, it was hugely relevant. It had a huge impact, especially in terms of like children, which admittedly is the target audience for this movie. Kids were obsessed with Forky. That character was everywhere. And like every child that I encountered, like in family or babysitting or whatever, were like, they were all in on this movie.
Okay.
So like I think it hit its target demographic and I think it did what it set out to do, which was make money. Um, but I don't agree with it existing.
Makes sense. I also think that the Keanu Reeves character
Oh my gosh, yeah.
really was something that sort of entered the zeitgeist there for a while as well. But people just love Keanu Reeves.
I mean, how do you not?
The Lion King. The Lion King live action made almost $1.7 billion. It had frickin' Beyonce in it. And I forgot it existed until I was looking at this list. And they did a sequel.
Yeah. This is the only movie on this list that I have never seen, and I probably won't. Like there's no pull to it for me. Um, and again, once it left theaters, I completely forgot about it. And then they announced they were doing the sequel, and I was like, oh my God, that's right. They did a first one of these years ago. It's there.
It is, yeah. Um, I could say this is almost the personification of everything that's going wrong right now for Disney, or everything that's leading them in the wrong direction. The second that they made this and it made $1.7 billion, there was no turning back because they know they can just do a Mufasa and it will make money. Maybe it won't make $1 billion, but it's going to make more than whatever animated picture that's an original story because they won't promote it well enough.
Yeah.
I thought there was a time when I don't even remember what was the topic, but on John Oliver's show, he said, that would be like me saying I was the best Zazu. I might believe it, but it is objectively not true. And that I think says it all about the Lion King live action remake.
One
And
more thing about that.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, go.
One more thing about the Lion King live action that makes me really mad. It's not a live action movie.
Well, see, that's what
Like,
I was gonna say. I was gonna say that that was what Sarah says. Our other co-host was like, I still hate when people call it live action. I understand why they call it live action, so I will still do that. But yes,
yes,
they are CGI animated
right. And
animals.
like it was absolutely marketed as a live action, for sure. But ultimately at the end of the day, all it is animating characters with less expressive animation. That's all you're doing. You're taking these characters who had these like massively expressive faces and emotions because they were animated cartoons and saying, well, a real lion wouldn't move that way, so we can't do that. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why it was animated to begin with, because the format doesn't work fundamentally if you try to make them real lions. And I think that's like kind of just the crux of the issue with that movie.
And then the last couple months of 2019, we had no idea what was about to hit us and shut down the world. But Disney released two more billion-dollar movies, and they spent probably close to $500 million promoting them.
Easily.
And they got their money, but just barely, actually, when you go look at the final numbers, the final tallies. Frozen 2 and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. So, first, we're going to start with Frozen 2, which I don't think had a huge cultural impact. However, I noticed when I was watching the Disney Starlight Parade, the new nighttime parade at Magic Kingdom, and when Elsa was coming around on her float, they were able to play songs from Frozen 2. It's now 6 years after that movie, so at least some of the songs stayed culturally relevant enough that I think they are now in the Disney milieu, and they will be songs that you can hear throughout Disney parks, Disney stories, Disney shows. They might be available for fireworks, parades, things like that. Even though on Main Street USA, they do still play an instrumental version of The Cover Is Not the Book and from Mary Poppins Returns. And I don't know if that necessarily has the cultural relevance that we would be talking about here, but the songs seem to have stuck. I don't know if the movie itself stuck that much.
So here's my thought. I think it is, first of all, I personally enjoyed this better than the first Frozen, which I love. So like both of these movies get very high remarks from me.
Agree.
So maybe I'm a little biased, but I think that it is very culturally, I think that it is very culturally relevant. I think that, like you said, the songs are well known. There were a lot of moments in this movie that took off, like Christoph's whole 80s inspired power ballad. That was a huge deal. I just think that we're skewed by the impact the first one had. Like, I think that the first Frozen was so omnipresent for so long, everywhere you looked, that we look at Frozen 2 and we go, oh, it really wasn't that impactful. But, like, it was by any other movie standard. Like, these are still characters that are hugely beloved. It's like you said, it's being incorporated into shows. It's still hitting a lot of like Disney milestones for relevance and impact. But, you just, the scale is so broken when you think about how Let It Go was everywhere for like 3 years.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that answer. I think that's a valid answer. You definitely thought about that one. Now, here I'm going to come with the most controversial opinion of the entire thing. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is the most irrelevant billion-dollar movie of all time.
I mean, it's certainly up there.
I think it is more irrelevant than the Aladdin live action remake, than the Lilo and Stitch live action remake. It is okay, maybe not the Fate of the Furious, but besides that, looking on this list, I would be hard pressed to find a movie that had less of an impact, because what Disney was trying to do with this one was almost not have an impact. Disney was
Hmm.
trying not to offend anybody with Rise of Skywalker. And the whole thing was reading the internet and where people complained and trying to correct that, but trying not to overcorrect it because you don't want to make the other people upset. So it just became a large blob of really great special effects, really great fan service moments where we got to see Lando again and we got to see Han Solo again. But in the end, do you even think about this movie being a part of the Skywalker saga anymore? Do you even think about the plot points that were, well, the ones that were there? Do you even like really think about them as being part of the grand story of Star Wars, the Skywalker saga? This is the end of 9 movies, and it just felt like, oh, a pretty cool movie on its own.
Yes, it is almost impressively bland in the way that it does nothing. Like like to get to a point where you're not saying anything, you know, I mean you kind of are, but like it's not you're like trying to half say something without fully throwing your full weight behind it in case it makes someone mad. So you're like, "Hey, this might be good. Maybe family's not blood, but also it is because here's this relation. Everyone's happy, right?" And it's like, well, no, actually. That's not how it works. You have to kind of pick something to be your message or to be your moment. And like honestly, the most culturally relevant thing to come from this movie is the somehow Palpatine returned meme. Like that's the thing. That's the thing that everyone knows and references and talks about. I use it constantly. But like outside of that, it's just it's incredibly frustrating as a Star Wars fan to be like you have this whole 9 movie saga and like even the prequels where like a lot of people were like the prequels suck. They stuck the landing with that third movie. Like
They did.
it pulled together. It ended up in a good spot. This did the exact opposite, where it's like they started off kind of jogging, then with The Last Jedi they like got into a good stride, and then Rise of Skywalker is like they tried to jump the hurdle, fell into it, and just laid there and didn't get back up. Like that's what it felt like watching that movie, and I, it is frustrating because it could have been so great. And as it is, its impact is mostly how it failed to live up to its expectations.
Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is an encapsulation of Bob Iger's tenure as chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company. It is everything that's good about Bob Iger, because they have Disney, or they have Star Wars because of Bob Iger. They wouldn't have
Right?
had Star Wars. But we can't make anybody mad. We can't alienate any customers. You're from the Chicagoland area. It always reminds me of that part in Wayne's World where Wayne says, it's like he wants us to be liked by everyone. Led Zeppelin didn't write songs that everybody likes. They left that to the Bee Gees, right? And if you're trying to make a Star Wars movie, you have to make something impactful. And I left, it was like cotton candy.
Hmm.
I watched it and I had a great time. And I left the theater feeling great. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, nothing happened. I just
Yep.
watched something fun to visually experience. And Now, there's no cultural impact to it. Even Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, the theme park lands, take place before the rise of Skywalker. So even the only thing really still active is before that movie happened. So it's almost like that movie didn't happen. When you ride Rise of the Resistance, you're riding post The Last Jedi. So it's really, really a unique thing that they were able to make this movie that probably had more hype than any Disney movie before it, even. Like, this was the most hyped movie I can remember. And a couple months after it came out, nobody was talking about it anymore.
Yeah, it really is one of those things where you have decades building up to this exact moment and this story that's being told. There are decades of storytelling behind this. And then they like created something fun, but you don't really think about it ever. And like the more you think about it, the less it holds up. So you really can't think about it too much to begin with. So you just get something that like is there and technically it's a finale, but it is not the grand finale that Star Wars deserved. It is not the grand finale to like mirror Return of the Jedi. Like it doesn't pull off the same level of wrapping up a storyline that the other Star Wars movies have.
It really just dropped the ball in so many different ways. And it's like bubble gum pop in the 60s. They call it bubble gum because you don't even eat it, right? You
Right.
don't even get food from it. Um, it made less money than the live action Beauty and the Beast.
Oh boy.
That's
Oh,
insane.
that is a stark statistic. Wow.
And now this is adjusted for inflation. I want to go over the 10 highest grossing movies as of 2024, adjusted for inflation. And this is just going to show you when you think about how important these movies are
Hmm.
compared to some of the movies that we just mentioned. And if you don't adjust for inflation, some of these didn't make as much as the ones that we're discussing. Number 10 is Star Wars The Force Awakens. Number 9 is Dr. Zhivago.
Hmm.
Okay, I think I have heard of it. I guess it's from 1965. So, all right. Number 8, The Ten Commandments. Number 7, E.T.
Oh wow.
Number 6, I don't know how you feel about this movie. The Sound of Music.
Yeah, I wonder.
Number 5, Avengers Endgame. 4, Star Wars A New Hope. 3, Titanic. 2, Avatar. Number 1, Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Now, you can have your opinions on any of those movies. I absolutely hate some of them,
Hmm.
but they are culturally relevant. And when you're talking about a movie from 1939, a movie from 1956, you're not going to be talking about the live action Aladdin in 70 years.
No.
Unfortunately, you're not even going to be talking about the rise of Skywalker. So that goes to show how Disney dropped the ball there.
Yeah, it's just it is very interesting, especially put in that perspective. Um, yeah, I feel like it has already largely been forgotten in the sense of like People don't care too much about what it did. They're ready to move on from it. Um, so yeah, ugh, rough. Rough ending for that franchise. Boy, oh boy.
But it'll be coming back because we're gonna have a Mando and Baby Yoda and all that stuff. So
Sure will.
anyway, this was every bit the topic I was hoping it would be, Maz, and we definitely got to explore a lot of different things. So thank you so much for joining me as always. Can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this. It was absolutely a blast.